what else can I do that they haven't thought of doing? And I said, what else is happening? And they said, well, at the end of the day, we're going to have an improv session. People are going to shout out objections and people are going to be on stage role playing. And I said, what if I stayed and would whisper in somebody's ear if they got stuck in the improv, what to say for my keynote? And they go, what? No one's even offered that or thought it. We hadn't even thought of asking that. That's fantastic. I became irresistible.
Yeah.
So that's how you can quickly go from invisible to intriguing to irresistible. They start going, that's amazing.
Hi, I'm James Taylor, business creativity and innovation keynote speaker, and this is The Creative Life, a show dedicated to you, the creative. If you're looking for motivation, inspiration, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's an author, musician, entrepreneur, performer, designer, or thought leader. They'll share with you their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, and much, much more. You'll find show notes for this episode, as well as free training on creativity, over at jamestaylor.me. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to have on the show John Livesay. John, aka the Pitch Whisperer, is a sales keynote speaker and shares the lessons learned from his award-winning sales career at Conde Nast. He teaches companies, sales teams how to become irresistible so they are magnetic to their ideal clients. His TEDx talk, Be a Lifeguard of Your Own Life, has over 1 million views, and his best-selling book is called Best-Selling Through Storytelling. He is also the host of the successful Pitch podcast and has been interviewed by such luminaries as Larry King. So I'm a bit worried now. I'm not quite up to Larry King standards. But it's an absolute pleasure to have John with us today. So welcome, John.
Thanks, James. It's a pleasure to be here and no pressure at all. Larry was charming and you're equally charming, so you're good.
So share with us all what's happening in your world at the moment. What's got your focus at the moment?
My main focus is giving keynote talks to companies who have a sales team where they have to compete against 2 other firms. So they call them bake-offs. The lawyers call them beauty contests. Some people call them shootouts. Architects call them interviews. But it's when it's down between you and 2 other firms. So you filled out a proposal and you're invited to come in for the hour. And they have annual meetings and they typically bring me in to help them win more of those bake-off, shootouts, interviews, what have you, beauty contests. Because the old way was, well, if you're an architect, we'll just show you the design and whoever has the best design gets hired. And more clients are saying, we're going to hire the people we like the most. And the industries are like, what are these soft skills, storytelling, confidence, empathy? How do we do that? And so once I showed them that the problem they're having is, let's ask to go last of the 3 because whoever's last is memorable. And I said, but you can't control that. And they go, yeah. I said, but you can control telling the best story and that will make you memorable even if you're first. So I just love being able to give this new tool to people and they're winning more new clients because they're telling better stories.
So sometimes we hear this word selling or sales. At first, I sometimes going to go a little bit, the Alec Baldwin, what was that great movie? Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, always be selling,
right.
The Jack Lemmon character getting beaten down on the sales numbers. And obviously it's very 80s kind of style of thinking about things. So what is the role of sales? What does sales look like today for you with the kind of clients that you work with?
Well, the old way of selling, as you described, is to push a bunch of information out and throw as much spaghetti against the wall and hope some of it sticks. The new way of selling is to become magnetic, as you described earlier, and pull people in. So it's a whole transition from pushing to pulling. And it looks like, as I mentioned, these big brands, everyone has to sell themselves all the time. And the old way of selling, as you said, was always be closing. Maslow has this great quote that if the only tool in your toolbox is a hammer, you tend to go around looking for nails to hit. Do you want to buy? Do you want to buy? Do you want to buy? And so I work with people on storytelling as a new tool in the toolbox. And instead of always be closing, I shift it to always be kind. ABC becomes ABK. So it starts with our self-talk. Because we can beat ourselves up, James, more than anybody else ever could. I'm not good enough. I'm never going to get this new client, all that negative self-talk. Then the way we talk to our coworkers. I need this by now, And then, of course, it becomes, how do we talk to the potential new clients? And if you have this mantra, and I tell people to put ABK on a Post-it note in your car, if you have road rage, by your phone, and it really helps that. So you start being more kind to yourself and the people you're interacting with. So it's the antithesis of the old way of doing it, of pushing, pulling people in with really compelling emotional stories that make people feel like they're in the story. Now, I want to really point out that the big thing here is when you tell a story, you are not the hero.
Ah, so
I
like
mean, really,
you're in LA, which is the land of great storytellers,
it
and
is.
there was that book, and I'm trying to remember. It's called, I think it's called Story. It was
Mm-hmm.
taken from the
Peter,
work of originally of Joseph Campbell, and
yes.
you'll tell me who the name of the author. I can't remember the name of the author
Peter
now.
Gruber, maybe?
Maybe it was Peter Gruber, and they kind of talk about this hero's journey that we often see
Mm-hmm.
repeated time and time again.
Yes,
I remember watching a video of yours when you were giving a presentation. You see, what a lot of brands get wrong is they put themselves as the brand, as the hero of this story. So what
correct.
should we be doing as the kind of the storytellers, as the advisors, as the person on the stage that's giving that information? Where should we be positioning ourselves in the story?
Think of yourself like a Sherpa helping somebody climb Mount Everest. And without you, it's very frustrating. You might get lost, you might get hurt. With you, the journey is much faster because you've helped hundreds of people like the Sherpa has up the mountain. And so that's the customer journey. Or you can think of yourself like Yoda in Star Wars. You're helping that person get on their journey. And, you know, typically in these 1-hour presentations, when firms have to sell themselves, whether it's a real estate firm, an ad agency, an architecture firm, an executive recruit, all of these companies, they have case studies. And usually it's a bunch of boring information. You know, here's the square footage of this office we designed, and here's the before and after pictures, and there's no story. But if you tell the story of someone you helped, and the potential new client sees themselves in the story with you as the Sherpa or Yoda, then they want to go on that same journey that the client you helped went on. And I can give you an example to even bring it more to life if you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Gensler is one of the world's largest architecture firms. Actually, they're the largest. And I recently gave a keynote talk and workshop to them, and they had a big bake-off interview coming up to win the Pittsburgh airport renovation. And that was a $1 billion project, whoever won that. 1 hour, you know. So obviously they get to the finals, and they had a case study, and I said, but we need to turn it into a story. So I said, every good story has 4 elements, James. The exposition, where you paint the picture, who, what, where, when. Then you describe a problem, and then you describe a little bit of drama, hopefully, of overcoming that problem, so it doesn't seem like it was too easy. And then there's a solution. And then the secret sauce that most people forget is the resolution. What is life like after? So that case study suddenly sounds like 3 years ago, we helped JetBlue at JFK turn that airport into a selling mecca. The problem was, after we got the job, we had to rip up all the tiles in the floor at 9 o'clock at night and be done by 9 in the morning so all the stores could still open and not lose any revenue. We had all our vendors on call all night long in case something went wrong. And sure enough, a fuse blew at 2 in the morning. We called that vendor in, and they were there in 20 minutes. They fixed everything, and at 8:59 in the morning, the last tile went down, and the stores opened on time. Now, 2 years after the renovation, sales are up 15% in these retail stores because we've designed such an attractive place that people are spending more time shopping.
How much more interesting does that sound than a one-page PDF case study?
Or just describing, you know, the square footage and the before and after pictures without the drama. So you can see that story had an exposition. You knew exactly where it was, how long ago. The problem, you know, you're under a little bit of drama. You know, and so instead of just saying to somebody, we anticipate problems, you tell it, you show it in a story. Now, again, the hero in that story is JetBlue, because they now have a great terminal and they're getting more revenue, and there's a lot of other resolution things, like they got press in the New York Times and all that good stuff. So the solution obviously is they opened on time, but the resolution part is really people go, oh, and then your closing question simply becomes, does that sound like the kind of journey you'd like to go on? This is how we like to work with our clients. And they're on that journey. Yes, I saw myself in the story. I see what value you bring. It's pulling them in as opposed to pushing.
And when you're brought into companies as a keynote speaker, often you're obviously brought in as it might be the sales kickoff for an event, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or some types of sales, obviously it's more sales focused.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, how do you win over those hard bitten, because you're not just talking about this as a reporter, as a researcher, you've been a practitioner when top sales
Yes.
Conde Nast.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, you've been in that chair, you've been in that audience where you can,
Exactly.
okay, it's kind of a little bit kind of sit back, okay, impress me, what's the
Yes.
latest fad? How do you win over some of those kind of hard bitten sales
Well,
folks
like to
out there?
your point, I talk about I've been in their shoes. I know what it's like to have a quota. I know what it's like to top yourself. I also know what it's like to get laid off and live with that fear and then get rehired and what I come back with no fear. And I realize that whoever tells the best story gets the sale. And if they're struggling with how I just had my best year, how am I going to top myself? The storytelling skills might be the secret sauce that they're not using. And when they hear examples of it, then the cynical people typically go from, this is just another boring sales keynote, to stories. That's the joy of great storytelling, is it pulls people in. So I give them stories of people who've used storytelling to help their career and other stories of lessons learned. But the real aha, the big takeaway in my keynote is how to go from invisible to irresistible as a salesperson, but also in your personal life. And I've created a ladder of the different rungs on the ladder. So at the bottom is invisible, and there's a lot of target accounts that people want, but they've never heard of you or your company. You're invisible.
Mm.
And same thing in the dating world, right? You go to a party, before you were married, you never had this problem because you're attractive, but you see somebody, they don't know you're in the room. Then you move up to insignificant. Back to the business analogy, you sell life insurance. That's insignificant to me. I'm not looking for it. In dating, I don't know what's worse, James, insignificant or invisible. And then you move up to interesting. Maybe you say something that gets someone's attention. They're not going to buy from you and they're not going to go on a date with you yet, but they're at least interested. And this is where a lot of people in sales or new business pitches, business development, whatever you want to call yourself, struggle. I am stuck in interesting land. It's the friend zone at work. Yes. And you can't get out of that. You're just having endless conversations. Nobody ever commits.
Yeah.
And so the next rung up is intriguing, where you say to somebody, if we were to go out, here's what it would look like on a date. The town car picks you up. We go to the Griffith Park Observatory and you start painting this picture.
You can have like future pacing there with the client.
Yes, exactly. That what if concept.
Mm.
And people will literally lean in and say, oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. And then you've got them out of interesting. And then you get to the irresistible level. And that's, of course, in dating, when they can't stop thinking about you and they're texting you all the time. And in business, these are your brand ambassadors. They love you. But a lot of people are ignoring them. And they're not asking for the referrals and the references, and they're not keeping them at the irresistible level. So just identifying where clients are and where they see you, and not jumping from invisible to irresistible. Like, you don't ask someone to marry you, and maybe you did on the first date. Most people don't. But yet in the business world, some people go, hi, nice to meet you. Do you want to hire me? And
it's a bit creepy.
So that awareness of, and then strategizing with the teams. Okay, we're stuck at interesting. What can we do to move up to intriguing? And then looking at the clients that are each rung completely revolutionizes the roadmap, combined with storytelling, and they become revenue rock stars.
So some of your clients, they're obviously larger B2B companies. And then maybe like some of our clients are speakers. It might be the sales cycle is a little bit is shorter. It might be a week or a few weeks, but some of these big companies is B2B. Mm-hmm. And then if we go right back to obviously maybe some of our audiences listening or watching this just now, they're very much, many of them are maybe in that more B2C type of market where the sales cycle can be even shorter sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I think like the shortest sales cycle is almost that elevator pitch of going in there. And I don't know, maybe I always just feel that Americans are better at this, the elevator pitch. I just find as someone who's from the UK, it's always a struggle for me. Like, people say, okay, you need to get your 60-second elevator pitch.
Yes.
And I always really struggle. And I know this is quite a common thing. I speak to a lot of my friends, whether they're from Europe or not, they struggle with how to do this elevator. So this is something you're very good at doing, it teaching people about how to do this.
I love it. It's
So
such a fast transition, and I'm going to work with you in a second. But let's jump first into the people who happen to be listening to this who are speakers. And much like the companies who go into those interviews or bake-offs, whatever you want to call oftentimes, I'm sure this has happened to you, they're like, oh, it's between you and 2 other speakers, or you and 1 other speaker. And so you have your moment to tell them why you. And I was doing this with Anthem Insurance, and they said, listen, our audience are not salespeople. They're nurses and MBAs. And they don't want to be seen as salespeople, even though they need to start selling this data and they don't know how to handle objections. I said, what if we asked them to think of themselves as storytellers instead of salespeople? Oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, great. So I'm at the interesting rung. And then I said, I got to come up with something that makes me irresistible. And I said, and this is what everyone who's a speaker can do. What else can I do that they haven't thought of doing? And I said, what else is happening? And they said, well, at the end of the day, we're going to have an improv session. People are going to shout out objections and people are going to be on stage role playing. And I said, what if I stayed and would whisper in somebody's ear if they got stuck in the improv, what to say for my keynote? And they go, what? No one's even offered that or thought it. We hadn't even thought of asking that. That's fantastic. I became irresistible.
Yeah.
So that's how you can quickly go from invisible to intriguing to irresistible. They start going, that's amazing.
And you're also then difficult to compare. It's apples and oranges.
Yes.
It makes it like difficult. Well, what do we want? And you're also segmenting yourself. You're positioning yourself in a slightly what they would class in strategy, that blue ocean strategy. You're in a different place now.
So they picked me, and the resolution of this story is, I usually don't label it like that, but for the audience and listeners and watchers to really get it is, when I was doing the improv with them on stage, I would whisper in there and people were like, oh my God, you really are the pitch whisperer. Can you be in my ear the whole time I'm in the field now? And they just got a huge, they loved it. Yeah. So think of what you can offer above and beyond your keynote that makes you irresistible. All right, back to the elevator pitch. So the 2 key things, we're going to do it in real time with you, is who do I help and what problem do I solve? That's once we have that answered, because remember the goal of the elevator pitch is to intrigue people enough to say, that's interesting, James, tell me more. So when someone says, hey, what do you do? It is not an invitation for a 10-minute monologue. That's the first mistake people make. And the second mistake is they haven't identified clearly who they help and what problem they solve. So if we can do that, it really helps hone in that elevator pitch just enough to tease people. And I'll give you an example of mine and we'll jump into you. So I think it'll be a little easier. So you know how companies are struggling to win these pitches they have to go in to get when they're in the final 2 or 3? Well, what I do is I help them stop pushing and become storytellers and pull that in. And when that happens, they start winning more new business pitches because they're storytellers that make them memorable, and it doesn't matter what order they go in. Like, how do you do that? Right. And then tell me more.
Tell me more. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So who do you help, James?
So I'm known for helping multinational companies. I help big global companies.
Okay. But what department, what division of those companies? And, who's your ideal? Is it the HR people? Is it salespeople?
It's usually the C-suite or the senior leadership or the senior partners if it's accounting or legal or audit.
Okay. Got it. All right. So what problem are the C-suites having at big companies?
So the problem that they're having is we're going through this massive fourth industrial revolution in adapting to change, technological disruption. And they found out that creativity is the number 1 skill, the soft skill that they need to develop in their people. And I come in to basically help unlock the creativity of their people, help them become more innovative and adapt to change so they can create products and services that are going to grow their businesses.
Okay, great. So if I'm pretending to be you, and here's the phrase, here's the opening phrase that makes it very conversational, and I think this might help you in your comfort zone. You literally say, you know how, I don't know if you noticed I did that when I was describing mine. So you would literally say, you know how big companies are struggling, that defines the problem. So I've already identified the who and what problem by the word struggling.
You're saying struggling.
Struggling to deal with all the disruption that's happening at a speed that we've never seen in our lifetime before. Well, part of the problem is with all this disruption increasing, the creativity goes down and innovation stops cold in its feet. What I do is I come in and get creativity going at the same speed as the disruption. And when that happens, the businesses really have a competitive advantage, and they love working with me because they attract top talent, because everybody wants to work at a place that's known for their creativity, and then you drop in a client name,
Okay.
Apple or whoever you work with.
So I think that interesting. So obviously the phrase I love. I think that's great because it's just very, it's very conversational.
Mm-hmm.
But I also love the bridge that you say, well, part of the problem. So that's saying actually that the problem you think is a problem. So in my case, a lot of the audience think that the problem is really about technology and that is obviously part of the issue. But really, my take is it's a lack of creativity, and people's creativity has been suppressed for many years through no fault of their own, education, different things. And it's about unleashing that creative potential. So that, well, part of the problem is the bridge, and it allows you to kind of move off. And I think what's interesting about that model, the elevator pitch model, I almost think it's like, I think someone like Sally Hogshead talks about how to sell up, creating things on how to sell up. So even the phrase, the way that structure that you just sold it, you said it there, is quite an easy way for someone to repeat and then sell up to someone else in their organization. Hey, I just met this, I was on the lift coming up from this event, and I met this guy was saying, and so you can see how it's quite easy. And if you get those little hooks within it as well, little memorable phrases to then make them remarkable and repeatable.
Right. And one of the best things to do is give a visual. As disruption keeps growing faster and faster, creativity does the opposite and comes to a screeching halt. See, words I chose that paint a picture and a feeling. They're like, oh, screeching halt of creativity. That's not good. Yeah. Here's the solution to that while dealing with disruption, because the disruption speed's not going away. We know that. But if you can get that to match, and then you're taking them on a journey, aren't you? From screeching halt creativity, because no one has time and they're too stressed out trying to learn a new software or whatever the deal is, or competition's coming or whatever is taking them away from creativity. But you can get that to move up on the journey. Yeah. I mean, how do you get So I would say, God, that's interesting, James. How do you get creativity to go from dead stop to even moving at all? And then you would be invited to tell me more.
Yeah. So you're creating those pictures. For me, I know the one I use a lot is basically this fourth industrial revolution, all the change that's going, it's like a landscape that's slowly being flooded. And, in the lowlands, you had skills like arithmetic, memorization. Well, machines are taking away those jobs. But now this flood is reaching the foothills, and those kind of knowledge work like you and me, we're having to contemplate retreat. Creativity lies at the peak of the mountain. That's often the way I'll paint it as a picture that way sometimes as well.
Yes.
You mentioned there, some of the things that you were saying about these, so we're talking about elevator pitches, the kind of the Yoda. I've seen some of your videos you've done before on stage. You're also very good at placing phrases or little mind things that just hook in and reverberate after you've left the stage. So how do you go about thinking about those things that are repeatable and stuff that's going to resonate even when you're not there?
Well, what I found is that from being on television, they love you to speak in sound bites. Okay. And so when you're crafting your story that you're going to be on television. So John Livesay is on today to teach people how to be more confident. And surprisingly, even the most seasoned people have trouble with their confidence, especially if they're being asked to sell something new or to a new market. So I tell a story of how I helped a client by using a technique which is called stacking your moments of certainty. And when I teach this in the keynote in the workshop, people go, man, that stuck. Because I took a concept and tied a story to it. So the story is, Martin, one of my clients, came to me and he said, when I did this exercise, you'd write down 2 or 3 times you knew you nailed it. You asked your wife to marry you. She said yes. You got interviewed for a job. You got a yes. And that allows you to replace those negative self-talks when you're going in for something new. So you're stacking your moments of certainty. And Martin said, I was born in South America. I grew up in the Netherlands. When I turned 18, my parents took me back to South America, dropped me off naked in the Amazon jungle to survive for 2 weeks because of my culture. That's a rite of passage into manhood. I said, woo, that gives me chills. Okay, let's work on that story. What lessons did you learn in the Amazon jungle? Well, I learned how to focus and pivot and persevere. Great. And when he had that story practice, he told that story to investors he got a startup funded because the investor said, God, if the guy can survive the Amazon jungle, he'll figure out the concrete jungle of being in the business world.
Yeah.
Right? So bam, look, let's just take a second and go behind the curtain again. Exposition, who, what, where, when. Naked in the, and I said, if you don't say it's a rite of passage in your culture, it sounds like child abuse. So you got to paint enough of a picture. The problem is clearly he's naked for 2 weeks. The solution is he learns those life lessons. And then the resolution is he gets a startup funded by telling that story, as opposed to just saying, I'm someone who's resilient. So that's an example of that. And then I tell people, you're going to get butterflies in your stomach when you get nervous or scared. I did when the robotic cameras came at me when I was being interviewed on television. And 2 seconds later, I had to be relaxed. But you don't know your fight or flight response comes. Mm-hmm. There's no person behind them. They're on a track. John Livesay is here to talk about confidence. He just got scared to death. And I said, the goal is not to get rid of the butterflies in your stomach, but to get the butterflies to fly in formation. People love that as a soundbite on television and in the talk. Yeah. Because they go, oh, I can remember that. I can visualize that.
These are visual memorization.
I can get.
So, I mean, you're traveling, you're speaking to all these different groups. In terms of your own personal creative journey, has there been a key aha moment or light bulb moment in your life where you've said, okay, this is the direction I want to go with my life and work? Or you made a very important distinction in your life, which has really changed things about how you live and work today?
Yes. I would say that after being laid off, after being at Conde Nast for 15 years, and talking about how our identity is not based on what we do for work, you had to really look at that in reality. And then reinventing myself, kind of like silent movie stars had to learn talkies. I had to learn to sell digital instead of just print ads. And then being rehired 2 years later for winning Salesperson of the Year, because I didn't come back with any fear, for the whole company, not just my brand. I thought, wait a minute, I'm the same person. That was my aha moment, whether I'm being laid off or winning this award. So I want to get off this self-esteem roller coaster of only feeling good about myself if things are going great or my numbers are up, and bad about myself if I'm not getting what I want or the numbers aren't great, because I've been on that roller coaster and it's exhausting and it burns you out. So that's my personal mission. And that's when I had my aha moment that I really want to focus on getting as many people as possible off this self-esteem roller coaster through my speaking and workshops and book.
Fantastic. And talking about books, if you were to, obviously you've got your own writing, but if you were to recommend one book to our audience, not one of your own books, right, maybe a good, it could be around storytelling or sales, or some of the things we've talked about, or just something around the self-esteem piece that you were mentioning. Yes. What would that book be?
The book would be Deal Storming by Tim Sanders. It's a great book about collaboration and how important it is to collaborate with all the departments and not just think everything's so siloed.
Fantastic. There's a new book. I haven't actually heard about this book before, so I'm going to go and check this one out.
Yes.
And then what about a tool? Is there an online app or a mobile app or a tool you find very useful for doing the kind of creative work of what you do?
Well, there's all kinds of tools, for my podcast, just keeping that and the dashboard. And I love having a dashboard so I can see where the podcasts are in production, they're still editing that and now it's done. So the company I work with, Podicize, has a great software tool that allows me to see where things are and move the order around if I need to and things like that.
Fantastic. And so what was that tool? What was the one that you used?
Well, the company that they use, the name of the company that uses that tool is called Podicize, Podetize.
Podicize. Excellent. I don't know that one either. So all these new tools, new things I'm learning. And then you're in a great music city. You're in some of my favorite albums have been created. I was just working with someone the other day who worked on the Joni Mitchell album. I think it was called Hissing of the Summer Lawns. And they recorded just in kind of West Hollywood there. And so I'm going to ask, this might be a difficult question for you, but
okay,
if you recommend an album that we should be checking out, maybe something you personally are really passionate about, or you think more people should be listening to, what would that album be?
Let me just look. I think the artist's name is Ben Platt. He's an actor. He was in Dear Evan Hansen, and he's going to be in a new network show called Politician. And he has a great album out called Sing to Me Instead.
Sing to
I
me
highly recommend.
instead. Fantastic. We'll put all the links for everything you're mentioning here on the show notes, so everyone can go and check those out as well. And then a final question for you, John. I want you to imagine you woke up tomorrow morning and you have to start from scratch. So you have all the skills, all the knowledge you've acquired over the years, but you know no one and no one knows you. What would you do? How would you restart things?
The first thing I would do would start up my podcast again. That's been the best tool for connecting with people and getting to know people and learning from my guests and getting them to know about me and getting them after, a good guest, I'll often say, who else do you know that should be a guest, and build that back up.
Fantastic. And we're gonna have links here to the podcast. But if people want to learn more about you, your keynotes, your books, I know you have other courses and other things that are happening as well. Where's the best place for them to go and do that?
My website, which is my name, John Livesay, Livesay. I also, for people who are in the States, you can text the word pitch, PITCH, to 66866, and I will send you a free sneak peek of my book. And if you just want to go to my website, if you're not in the States, you can put your email in on my website and get a free sneak peek. And if you can't remember any of that, just Google the Pitch Whisperer and my content will come up that way.
Well, it's been lovely having a conversation with you today. John, just being about, you have so much knowledge about sales and pitching, how to turn sales from this horrible, cold thing into this warm storytelling thing. And so I love the contribution you're making to the world of sales and selling. So thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all about your creative life. Thank you so much, James. If you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.